everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am the Grimm Reader, and today I wanted to talk a little bit more in depth, although not too in depth, don't worry, about this brick of a book that I recently finished, Clarissa by Samuel Richardson. One of the most famous works of 18th century British literature. It's canonical, it's world literature of a sort. I do think because of its length, only 1,500 in here. It's one of those books that's talked about more than actually read, and I mainly listened to it in 3 volumes. You can buy the 3 volumes on Audible, and each volume was 25 hours, so it's like 75 hours of listening. And I absolutely loved it, even though I know it's probably not for most people even, but I loved it. So why did I love Clarissa? I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. So it's an epistolary novel, so it's written in letters. And I really love that format, and I love listening to the different characters read out their letters. Although for a big chunk of it, you actually have one character reading out the main female character's letters to someone else. So it gets kind of convoluted in terms of the letters. And I actually did really like that. I said in a tweet or somewhere how that made it sound almost like you're reading a play or listening to a play, sort of, because you get the different characters. And the way that dialogue was transcribed, but nevertheless kind of dialogue-y, was kind of pulls you along. Now, I loved it, but it's not an easy listen because it's really quite sad. I mean, at the heart of this is an abuser. And basically, Richardson kind of draws you into the sad fate of Clarissa, and then kind of twists it into, it's sad, but, you know, like, it sort of transcends the sadness, I would say. And so looking at my off-the-cuff notes that I just kind of scribbled down here or typed down, Clarissa is the systematic destruction of a woman's ability and will to live. So she basically gives up her life, so to speak, and it's a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler. I mean, it's such a classic work. I hope no one minds me spoiling it for you. But she decides that not living is better for her. And this is not like trigger warning suicide. No. But her choices, we're kind of like with her. And it's almost as if, because it's epistolary, we're in their heads more. It's almost like 18th century stream of consciousness of a sort, because he's so wordy about getting into the hashing out of the implications of every decision. And I'm looking at a website because I was trying to find out, the 18th century is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, a little bit. I'm kind of getting more used to the conventions. And one thing that I actually did really like was the 18th century idioms, the different uses of words, the fact that the place where her bed is always called a closet, but that's basically her bedroom. And then she has usually has a second room for not sleeping, but it's still her room. So they have like 2, but the bedroom's always called closets, for example. And there's other sort of funny vocabulary changes that we just don't say things the way they do. Like they'll talk about her being perverse, and it's not our definition of perverse. They keep calling her naughty. And she's like the most not naughty person you've ever met. And she's the most not perverse person you've ever met. But yet, because she's going against the people who have authority over her, basically her family first, and then the libertine Lovelace later, she's perverse and naughty. Well, she's more that with them. With the Lovelace, he has a different set of words because he's not getting what he wants from her. But I'm looking at the end of this website that maybe I'll post it to you, British Life. It says Richardson had enormous influence on the development of the novel, and we can really see that kind of how it sort of sets the novel down as a place where internal machinations about decision making in your lives can be kind of set forth in a different way than other types, like plays, for example, because it is still the epistolary aspect of the writing. His epistolary works transpose the details of ordinary life into high dramas of moral decision-making. I think that's well put. And maybe I'll even link to the video I made with Claudia, how we hashed it out, how I am a fan of poor Fanny, what's her name in Mansfield Park, Fanny Price, I think. And she wasn't. And she says it's so not romantic, and she gets to be with her cousin at the end, and that's not romantic. And Fanny's such a wet mouse of a character, and I'm like, Betty's great. She's and it's just, I think it's kind of goes along with my, for some reason, my heart goes out to the goody goodies, the supremely well-meaning, perhaps to the point of not being that likable. And Clarissa, I think she's extremely likable. I really felt for her so badly. And part of what's really well done is she has her best friend who's not quite at the level of goody-goodiness, for lack of a better term, even though I still love Clarissa. Anna Howe is more realistic. She's more kind of, I did kind of think a lot of times, well, how would she have handled her if she were in Clarissa's situations? Because Clarissa is very sort of trying to do the right thing, still gets taken advantage of to the point of sexual assault, and just kind of like, okay, fine, let me buy my coffin and hang out with my coffin in my room for a while, because that's what she does, and she shocks everyone by doing that. But I'm like, what's she supposed to do? She's just being practical about things. I'm sorry, it's like a bit spoilery too, but it's sort of like sad but funny, the whole coffin stuff at the end. So it's almost like it's death positive. I think there is that kind of like, in some terrible circumstances, when you're up against the wall in that type of way, in the way she is. So for a lot of times, she's a long time through the novel, or for the epistolary stuff, she pleads for the single life. Because, let me please just stay single. Please don't force me into marriage with this one person that I hate, and please let me alone. Please, abuser, leave me alone. Stalker, abuser, Lovelace, please leave me alone. I will be single. I will give up everything. Just let me live a life of my own choosing. She has no autonomy. She's constantly being put upon by first her family, who gang up against her in the most ridiculous and awful way. And it's just, the letters from her family are shocking. Like her sister, they're all, okay, so this is why I love it. There's shades of awfulness, and they're all slightly different. Like the mother's letters are different. The father's just awful. The sister's like so mean, and Cinderella-esque ugly sister mean, but in a really interesting, nuanced way. Like shades of awfulness. And then, of course, shades of not so awfulness with her and Anna Howe and a few other people that are not awful, but basically, and of course, the prime example of awfulness, like to the nth degree, is the Libertine Lovelace, the antagonist of the novel. I'm babbling, but that's what you're going to get with this one. Family and Lovelace destroy her. They exhibit envy, hatred, simply because she does not want to do what they want her to do, which is marry people. It's about marriage. A married man she abhors. Her steadfast refusal to submit causes her to become a complete outcast, and sexual abuse happens, and she's forced to run away. At some point she gets arrested, and she's completely innocent. Not only is she innocent, but she's a good person. So it's sort of like one of those situations. And it's just completely, I don't know, I loved it. The depths to which Lovelace will go to coerce her to do his bidding are ludicrous and comedic, and they do make for heavy listening. So I would say, some people say the first part's hard to listen to because of all the family stuff. I thought that was more riveting than the second part, where her voice is very, very pushed to the background, and all we get is the awful Lovelace and his voice. And so you have to kind of just go with it and like, okay, we're getting his side of things, and he's awful. But it's also interesting enough that you kind of like go with it. But I thought the middle part, where it's just him and his machinations, was for me the least satisfying in a certain sense, because I wanted to see hear her voice. And it's almost as if her voice does come back, but in a kind of rarefied way in the third part, I would say. Clarissa is able to keep above the fray only by deciding that to be unalived, to be dead, is to be better than to submit to what others want of her. Her loneliness, her sadness, and her utter aloneness in the world raise her into a higher sphere, and it does take on religious overtones, sort of transcendent. She becomes saint-like. I mean, she's always been a bit saint-like, but because she has to sort of realize, okay, fine, I'm out of here. I am not going to, become what you want me to become. I'm not going to marry Lovelace. There's a whole thing about her, but he doesn't even want to really marry her because he's so awful. He plays around with that. Lovelace is a narcissistic bully whose antics infuriate, but after a while we sort of adopt Clarissa's sad stoicism towards them. And we even start to see how his way of life isolates him. Not that we get really that much sympathy for him because he's so awful, but you know, we see his ignorance and his blindness, and how he, as a sort of narcissistic, toxic person, he's a user. He goes around and bullies everyone and to get what he wants, and he doesn't even realize how unliked he is. I don't think he doesn't care. I mean, he doesn't notice it really. He does have underlings, but they're so obviously underlings. His only way of relating to people is via a master servant kind of in dialectic. Not to get Hegelian on us today, for sure not. But anyway, and so we see the limitations, and it's almost like you could do a kind of master-slave chapter from the Phenomenology by Hegel, reading of Clarissa, how she kind of does win out because of just unwilling to submit. On this piece of paper I wrote how he reminded me of Milton Satan, but I'm not so sure if he really does. I don't know if from Paradise Lost, I'm not sure. Which is, I'm sure Richardson probably would have known it as a text. He does. There's actually quite a bit of quoting from other poets in the novel, in the epistolary novel. Dryden gets quoted quite a bit. Lovelace only sees Clarissa as a prize to be won and subdued. He does recognize her superiority, but it almost as if he wants her to acknowledge him so he can prove he's not the utter wretch that he is, because he recognizes her superiority, and that ain't gonna happen. His blindness as to his own awfulness becomes more and more apparent. Does he realize how blind he is? Is he pretending to really think he's justified in his awfulness, or does he actually just not care? I mean, it's sort of like that's the libertine by definition, that's that they don't care. Audible performance was superb, and I would highly recommend if you're wary. I don't think I could have read it. And it still took me a month to listen to with pretty consistent listening. But I could never have read it in that time because I'm such a slow reader in my eyes, and it's long, so, you know. And it's really well done. Like the voices are superb. The writing is also top notch. I really think as always with me, the reason why I loved it so much is the quality of the writing. It is long-winded, but there are passages of Shakespearean brilliance, and I don't really have the patience to go in and look for some of them for you. Just trust me on that one. There are. And I absolutely loved how intricate and nuanced it all was. I loved how every sort of point of view was hashed out. Like a lot of times when I read things, I'm like, well, I want more about why the motivations for why someone is doing something. And here you get all of that. And it's also very satisfying, even though it's sad. And in my Audible, which actually was even a bit longer than the book, some things had been cut from this Penguin edition. Not much. But there's an ending, and I don't think it's in here, where he kind of talks about why he had to be sad because of, you know, death positivity. And he does a good job of that. He's like, well, you know, like not all great plays have happy endings. And, you know, I'm okay, it's a little kind of thinking highly of himself, but he kind of has a point. Happy endings are... It's interesting how then it will turn into Jane Austen and all her happy endings, and even Trollope. Trollope does have happy endings. I mean, at least the ones I've read so far, the Basseters all have very, very satisfying happy endings. Actually, well, yeah, I'm thinking of Lily Daly at the end of the Basseter Chronicles. But I'm really glad that I loved it so much because it wants me to further explore 18th century stuff. And, you know, I've never read Robinson Crusoe, and I have never read Gulliver's Travels, and I probably really should. So now I'm thinking, I don't know if I'll like them as much because I'm not so much of a satire like Swift. I mean, I've read some of his stuff. A Modest Proposal, I read that in when I was studying English literature. Tell me what your experiences are with 18th century stuff, if you've read any of it. And actually, I want to read Sir Charles Grandison, which is apparently his version of male virtue. Like Charles Grandison is a male Clarissa, so to speak. I don't know, probably with better outcomes, hopefully. I don't know. And then, of course, there's Henry Fielding. I have read Tristram Shandy, which is also very satirical, and it's a lot shorter. But I should probably re-listen to that. The book that I've started, but I think I'm going to stop now with this one, and I'll give you an update of all the stuff I'm reading or kind of thinking of reading for the summer in the next video soon. But this was my little video about Clarissa. Absolutely fantastic canonical work of 18th century British literature. Takes place in the year 1747, and I guess that was also the backdrop that historically is something I don't know much about, the Jacobite uprising. So which doesn't play at all into the book. It's very apolitical. It's really just about people and their relationships. I mean, at some point Lovelace goes to Europe, but it's hardly anything about political stuff in there. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you all for watching, and I will be back pretty soon with a chatty reading update, most likely. Talk to you soon. Bye.